views and opinions expressed in this program are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect the views of BronxNet or the program underwriters.
Good evening and welcome to BronxTalk. Though you'd never know it, judging from the obvious emphasis in news coverage these days, we are currently in the middle of a very important campaign season in the borough of the Bronx. Always concerned about voter literacy, BronxNet Television will be providing plenty of candidate information over the next several weeks. We'll also be doing some other debates. Last week on BronxTalk, we hosted a debate for the Democratic primary in the 14th Congressional District, featuring Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Michelle Caruso-Cabrera, Badrun Khan, and Sam Sloan, who, by the way, as people asked about it, he had technical issues and couldn't participate after the first few moments. The incumbent, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, as you all well know, has become a lightning rod in Congress for a variety of reasons, and the debate itself had considerable fireworks. We'll continue with debates in two other congressional districts next week. But tonight, after last week's explosive debate, we brought in two people who are on actually opposite sides of that race to see what they thought of the debate, what they thought of the candidates and the issues involved, and then ultimately, which is really the bottom line question, what we need of elected officials to help us heal in the long run after we get through this pandemic. So please join me in welcoming a political operative who is a supporter of AOC, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. John Doyle, nice to have you with us, John.
Thank you, Gary.
And a councilman in the Bronx who actually was a candidate for that primary before he dropped out in early March, also from the 14th district, but the council district in the Bronx. It is the Honorable Fernando Cabrera. Sir, thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Gentlemen, a lot to talk about in this race. I guess we'll start with the incumbent. John Doyle, how did you think Ms. Ocasio-Cortez did during that debate?
Sure. I think the Congresswoman was very strong. I think she answered with incredible specificity on a lot of her policy positions. I think you asked her about immigration, you asked her about healthcare, you asked her about the economy, you asked her about her vote against the second stimulus bill. She provided you with a lot of examples why. You went into the Green New Deal. I heard a lot of specifics, a lot of policy concretes from the Congressman. And I didn't hear that from all of her opponents.
So you thought she did well?
I did think she did well. I mean, you know, obviously there are things maybe I would have done differently, but this debate, as the councilman's probably going to agree with, is always a referendum on the incumbent. And I think that she acquitted herself well. She was knowledgeable about the things she spoke about.
Boy, when you make that statement, you know I'm going to respond. What would you have done differently? I mean, how could I not go there?
All right. Well, again, you know, I just want to point out Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is in Congress. I'm sitting here in my bedroom talking to you. So, I mean, obviously she's made a lot of good decisions in life, but I would say, you know, the Congresswoman at one point, she alluded to the Trump Towers where Ms. Caruso-Cabrera formerly lived. There are a lot of things with a lot of aspects of Ms. Caruso-Cabrera's Republican ties she could have went into, but I think maybe she was right. That could have been a distraction away from her rationale for deserving a second term.
So that's interesting to me. In other words, you said she might have even been stronger on the counterattack, so to speak, by bringing up some of the other issues that did come up. Councilman, you ran. Why did you? Well, let's review that. Why did you decide to run originally, and then why did you ultimately drop out?
First of all, Gary, I want to thank you for moderating a great debate. It's not easy to do this online, and you did a fabulous job. It could have went really bad, people yelling at each other. So,
well, thank you very much, and I will tell you, this is a lot easier than that.
Yeah.
I've known both of you for a very long time. So anyway, go ahead, Councilman. Thank you.
So Gary, look, at the end of the day, there were two Cabreras running. You can't have two Cabreras running and in a given race. It would have been very confusing. So I decided, it was the right thing to do. I'm in office right now. And then, sometimes in life, you got to follow the river. There's a river of purpose, and that river has taken me to run for board president. And right now, many people consider me the front runner. So we have a lot of network that has taken place and continues to take place. So I'm happy about that.
Well, you and I and the Bronx will deal with that in the future. I assure you, we still have a little time before that. And so what did you think of the debate? I know that you had weighed in when BronxNet had it. And by the way, for people who haven't seen it, we're going to show a couple of clips, but also you can see it on YouTube and BronxNet.org, and you'll be able to, if you haven't seen it, it's interesting, let's put it that way. And you commented along the way. Talk to me about what you thought.
I thought Michelle Caruso Cabrera, which, by the way, she's not my cousin or relative. I just want to make it clear. She carried herself very well. Look, she's not a stranger to television. She's not a stranger to debates. She has a strong command of language and issues, and having discussed for over 20 years the issues related to business, jobs, which is going to be central in the next 7 years. It is one of I think it's the biggest issue that we're facing right now. The lack of jobs that we're going to have, the economy. Gary Miles mentioned we're going to go through a 7-year recession here. I believe that she really was focusing on the things that really matter, which is the economy, and that's her forte.
Well, obviously, she was concerned and has made a large point about the scuttling of the Amazon deal in Queens, but of course, it would have affected even us here in the Bronx. What do you think about that, Councilman? I mean, that's a large policy question for the city, so you can put on your councilman's hat as well. If somebody were to suggest, let's say Amazon or somebody to come in the Bronx, would you say, yes, we want them? Or is that the wrong message because we really want to emphasize small businesses and build up our economy that way?
Well, I don't think they were mutually exclusive. I think the Amazon was going to help a lot of the small businesses, education. It was going to create schools. We were talking about having Amazon schools to fast track young people, Black and brown communities to be able to benefit from that. We're talking about $27 billion. I have to tell you, the debt in the city keeps growing. And this is, look, we have some savings, but that's going to go out the door. It started with $7.1 billion. Last time I checked, it's over $9 billion. I think it's going to be more like $10 billion. So we could have used that $27 billion tax break. And I know, the kind of argument is, well, we're going to give them a tax break. Every private corporation that comes here with 300 employees or more, they get it, automatically they get it. But every other city was yearning for that. And we could, I tell you, couldn't be any, we couldn't ask for anything better than that right now. And unfortunately, those jobs are not going to be replaced. There's no way to get 25,000 jobs anywhere right now. And so I think that was a good point she was making.
Councilman, what is your biggest concern with the incumbent in that race? And why did you say, hey, look, somebody's got to step up, whether me or somebody else? What is your concern about Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez?
My biggest concern, one was the Amazon deal. That was my first red flag. Second red flag is socialism. And we know this recession that just started and the coronavirus has really magnified how important free enterprise is to society. We know, and we're not talking about not having social services, of course, we have those.
So wait, let me just interject. So you draw the line and say, well, wait a minute, Social Security and Medicare, these things you think.
Yeah, of course.
Socialist
Of course. Yeah, I mean, those are, and the reason why we could have those is because we have a free enterprise society. New York City is a prime example of that. I mean, we have Wall Street here. We have the greatest economy in all of the United States here in New York City because of free enterprise. And this is why we could provide service like no other states can do. Texas, Florida, any other state. It's because we have free enterprise.
Let me bring John Doyle back in.
Like,
John, you have issues with some of the things.
yes, with due respect to the councilman, you know, again, I don't happen to be a socialist, but since I'm on here to be a surrogate, I guess for Congresswoman, let me defend that point of view for a second here. I think it's very important to realize, you know, because we can get into a long discussion about socialism and communism and this and that. That's not what we're talking about here. And I think the Congresswoman was very specific in what we're talking about. Look at her, look at those like her, the DSA. What they're talking about primarily is a universal public healthcare system, which many of our NATO allies have, and free public colleges. These aren't radical positions. And I do feel the need to point out the United Kingdom, Canada, France, Germany, Italy, some of our closest allies have these systems. They're still our allies. They still have a free market enterprise economy, the European Union. So it's not as if adopting these policies are going to transform us into the Soviet Union. We're talking about policies that people like FDR, Harry Truman, many others have supported throughout the history of our party and throughout the history of the country.
Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, either she wanted it or didn't want it, but she won this very extraordinary defeat of one of the most powerful men in Congress. And ultimately, it brought her instant international fame. She was on all the networks, and she, as I said at the top of the show, has been a lightning rod. However, the constant critique has been she's not available in the district. Took her a long time to open an office. What I think we're going to do, I want to show a clip about that dialogue about her being so-called MIA. That's what Ms. Caruso-Cabrera said, AOC is MIA. So we're going to take a look at that brief dialogue, and then we'll get both of them to talk about whether or not the incumbent has been a responsive Congress member.
The grief, I suppose, the grievance that Ms. Cabrera, Caruso-Cabrera, apologies, has is that I spent several days after one vote in March in my apartment. And the fact of the matter was that I wasn't feeling very well. And I wanted to take a few days. And I'm proud to say that we continue to have a strong field force on the ground. And this is the benefit of being a movement candidate. Again, I've continued to raise over almost $500,000 for food pantries, delivering meals myself, while also advocating for broader systemic change in Washington.
Thank you.
Well,
you get the final word.
25,000 jobs. That's the least you could do after driving away $27 billion in tax revenue that we could have had. Imagine if we had those jobs that you drove away right now to help us get back on our feet.
Okay, so John Doyle, what do you think? Has she been missing? You hear it from, I know you're out in the East Bronx. Many people say we never see her.
You know, again, that's a frequent criticism of everyone in Congress because they're spending most of their time in Washington, D.C. That was a frequent criticism of her opponent back 2 years ago. I've been to the office both in Jackson Heights. I've been to the office she shares with Assemblywoman Reyes. So, you know, I have seen her. I will say during this pandemic, her team has been out there delivering food. I've been out there with them, but they've been out there in every single neighborhood. I've been out in the Throggsnick houses. I've been out in Pelham Parkway houses with them. So I don't think this is the strongest criticism to have is during the pandemic that she wasn't there. And I do want to point out, she said she wasn't feeling well. We're instructing everybody, if you don't feel well, stay home. Yet for some reason, she is being held to a different standard, even though her staff was out there helping people. I don't think it's really strong.
But let's ask the councilman, has she been an absentee congresswoman, do you think?
I have
the
to tell
criticism is out there.
Yeah, Gary, you know, that claim, that criticism is not put upon Congressman Espaillat, Congressman Engel. They don't get those criticism because I have to tell you, I see them in the events. I see them in our community. The only congressperson that I see in the Bronx that is receiving that level of criticism is Ocasio. I mean, the reality is she's traveling all over the place and she's not here. That's not a secret. When I was running, I only saw her in one event. And all the events that I went to, and I went to a lot, Gary, both in Queens and the Bronx, I only saw her in one march. That was it. I didn't see her in any other event. And I agree with John that, of course, congressmen there in DC, they're doing the work. But I have to tell you, based on what I see, the patterns that I see with other congressmen, where they are here quite a bit and they're an event, and then in light of the fact their home office, you know, there are many congressmen that have two boroughs or two different constituencies. You know, she should have, and she could have. See, that's the thing. She could have her own office in the Bronx, and the Bronx is a needier borough. They deserve. Why is Queen getting something that we're not getting here? And the level of privacy that is in that office with Karina, as Bob Press has pointed out, is not there. So I think our Bronx residents, constituents deserve better.
You were quoted when you were running for that seat, saying that AOC parachuted in from Yorktown Heights. She doesn't speak to our values. But now listen, let's be honest. Michelle Caruso Cabrera grew up in New Hampshire, lived in a $15,000 a month Trump building on the west side of Manhattan. There's no question that she moved in specifically to run for this particular seat. Can't that criticism be levied at Ms. Caruso Cabrera and say, you know what, you're not a Bronxite either? And I have to tell you, I did watch the video on her website, and she basically is up there, and it's like coincidentally right across the street from where they were going to put the Amazon plant. Yeah. I mean, come on. You know, so is that criticism of her as valid as saying AOC is not really from the Bronx?
You know, here's the difference, Gary, and thank you for that question. The difference is when AOC came, she came with a banner saying, I'm from the Bronx, I've done this, I've done that. She has not done anything in the Bronx. Prior to her winning her election, no one knew her. The same claims that she's telling Caruso, she had not done anything in the Bronx. And she did come parachuting in. And she was going to run against Serrano. But when she realized she couldn't beat Serrano, she went and then decided to run against Crowley. And so, you know, the reality is she's not Bronx bred like she presented herself to be. Caruso, at least she's been in New York City. You know, she gets it. She's been here.
What I want to do is I want to show the clip. John is at the edge of his seat, dying to talk. So let's show this clip of the two of them bandying about not only AOC's roots, but MCC's roots of not specifically being from the Bronx. So let's take a look at that.
While it's disappointing to see Ms. Caruso Cabrera fixated on personal attacks and for some strange reason obsessed with the 6 days in March that I wasn't feeling well and had to stay in my apartment, I do think it's quite funny that she goes on and on about the fact that I have to live, that frankly, that I spend time in doing my job in Washington and coming home to the Bronx when she lived in a $15,000 a month Trump Tower apartment until 6 months ago. This woman probably couldn't even find Sunnyside on a map until she decided to challenge me for the sake of challenging me. She doesn't care about the Bronx. She doesn't care about Queens. She cares about running for running. No one's ever seen this person before. Who are you? Like, where is your family from? No, where have you lived? No one has seen you in this community before. And while I know you have multi-millionaires that finance your campaign and you're financed by the same real estate developers and big banks that would profit from the corruption in Washington and adding one more notch to their belt, I don't think it's important for us to do that. I don't think it's okay for us to do that.
Ms. Caruso Cabrera, presumably you want to respond to that. And then I do want to get the final question in. Go ahead.
Sure. Greetings from Sunnyside, Queens. I love Sunnyside, Queens. I love New York. I wish I had been born in New York. Unfortunately, I wasn't. My opponent is the one that nobody ever sees in the district. Let me tell you, the second this crisis started, I started delivering food and I started delivering masks. We went to RAIN up on Morris Park Avenue. We went to the Bronx Jewish Community Council up in the northwestern part of the district. I've been to Iglesia de la Familia. I've been to the Vishnu Hindu Temple. I have delivered nearly 50,000 masks and food and hand sanitizer to Jacobi Hospital, which I'm not sure you could have found on a map.
Well, there you go. They certainly didn't agree on those kinds of issues. I recall many years ago, I interviewed current Congressman Jose Serrano, and he was criticized for also not being around the district. And he said, you just have to remember that I work in Washington. And if I'm in the district too much, then you know, you're going to complain because I'm not voting or I'm not lobbying or doing the things I need to do in Washington. Anyway, John Doyle, you wanted to comment on the
I was going to tell that story.
You're going to tell
that story, believe it or not. But I will say, based on some of the other things the council members said, first off, I mean, look, people are making that criticism of Congressman Engel now, and I think it's unfair. I mean, people are in Washington to do their job. That's what we pay them to do. That's what we ask them to do, is to go to Washington to be our voice. When they come home, they should be providing constituent service. I see that from the Congresswoman, and I would challenge anybody respectfully to go to you know, every neighborhood that has been in need. I mean, they're getting fresh food and everything else. And I do really have to say, I think this clip that you just showed really kind of put this in contrast. You know, the council member leveled some criticism of the Congresswoman's ties to the district. Again, her family has lived here for many years in Parkchester, things of that nature. But her opponent lived in a $15,000 a month Trump Tower apartment. I mean, that's not the average struggle that people on City Island, people in Morris Park, people in Parkchester, people in Throgs Neck to Allerton, they're not living in $15,000 a month apartments where they can just instantly get up and move to run for office. Frankly, many of these people are having a tough time paying the rent because the Republicans in Congress have stymied our efforts to get a you know, kind of greater aid to our families.
Maybe the signature policy that AOC authored during her first term in Congress was the Green New Deal, and that came up during our debate. So John Doyle will give you the first chance at that. She presented it. The response from MCC basically was that it was too sweeping. We don't need that kind of thing. She talked about seawalls. What's your impression of the dialogue that was had over the environment?
You know, I mean, I know in the past clip, the Congresswoman said that Maria Caruso Cabrera couldn't find Sunnyside on a map. I'm not sure if that's true, but I know what I can't find on Michelle Caruso Cabrera's website is her policy positions. So while I appreciate she brought up seawalls in her response, I didn't see much on a coherent response about the environment, on climate change. Many of the East Bronx districts, we just did a forum on City Island about this the other day with Assemblymember Benedetto and Senator Biaggi about climate and the ways we need to protect our communities. Seawalls are a Band-Aid on a larger issue. We need holistic climate reform here, because if we don't take drastic action, we're going to be in trouble. She used the response on climate where she could have articulated an alternative route to attack AOC and her residency in the district. I don't think that was helpful.
Councilman, do we need the Green New Deal?
So there are many Green Deals. Okay, AOC does not have, you know, an exclusive deal. The fact is, look, her deal is, we're talking about $73 trillion. I mean, that's laughable. We can't even get right now $3 trillion right now for the coronavirus crisis that we're going through. The second thing is, I feel like for AOC, the solution to everything is the Green Deal. When you ask her, Gary, about what are we going to do about jobs, Green Deal. I mean, like, are you serious? That's
Well,
not the solution.
let me ask you this, friend. This is a policy.
And Gary, can I just point one more?
Yeah, sure.
One more, and that is that the Green Deal, the problem with the Green Deal, with what is happening right now, is just a disconnect to what's happening to our local businesses right now. And they're the backbone of our society. It's not we don't need a top-down type of government. And we could deal with the green issue very easily. The United Nations says we could tackle half of the emissions if we have more trees, something that already countries are starting to do. And second of all, if we could just fund just billions, not trillions, to the agency that deals with this, we could share, come up with those technology and share with everyone else. And that's what MCC was talking about.
Can't we generate jobs through a new sweeping way of looking at whether it be recycling, whether it be solar energy, and all the other alternatives to what we're doing now? Couldn't we generate jobs and new economies through that?
Gary, we have come up in the council with the most innovative Green Deal ever out of any city. We did it right here in the council. The Green Deal resolution that was put in at the Senate, U.S. Senate, was every Democrat voted it down. And our own candidate, presidential candidate, is against it. Look, can you create some jobs? Of course, but at $73 trillion? I mean, you could create anything with $73 trillion.
Yes, I think you could.
A tremendous amount of money, a free salary for everyone. The problem is we don't have that tree that my dad used to talk to me about that makes money in the backyard.
All right, we got about a minute left. So John, if you want to respond to that and offer a concluding comment, and then we'll let the councilman have the last word.
Sure. I mean, I've heard more about environmental policy in this forum from Councilmember Cabrera than I heard from candidate Cabrera in the debate. Again, I thought the strongest moment the Congresswoman had in the entire debate was when she invoked the New Deal and FDR. And can you imagine someone saying the New Deal would be too expensive? We couldn't put people back to work. We have 30 million people who are out of work right now. We should be talking about big, bold, structural change. That's what we need to do. We need to put people back to work. We need to give them good jobs. We need to give them union jobs. We need to give them sustainable jobs. These are the jobs of the future. We should be spending a ton of money towards this to put people back to work. People want a job. They don't want just money. They want a job. And the Green New Deal can provide a framework for doing that. We need a new New Deal, frankly. And I think that's what the Congresswoman is getting at.
I have to just tell you both, and of course the audience, one of the funniest moments I thought, and really was kind of silly, is when the MCC accused AOC for not being able to find Jacoby Hospital, Jacoby Medical Center. I'm pretty sure she knows where Jacoby Medical. She had said that she even was there the other day. That was like
interest there, so I'm not going to comment on that. But I will say she did invoke 5 times that AOC was MIA. That seemed to be the only point she got across in this debate.
Well, that's of course your side of the story. Councilmember, you have about 30 seconds to wrap it up.
Look, in closing here, the problem that I had in the debate is the veracity problem. It was a problem which AOC was not telling the truth. She said she was out 10 days sick. That's longer than the average person I know that had corona.
It was only 6, let's be accurate. It was 6
Okay,
days.
let's say 6 days, which is the average that I've seen people have corona. The fact is, she's been in TV and even TikTok 4 times during that time, dancing and so forth. And if she wants to do that, fine, but don't say that you were sick while you were doing that. We find she says do something, but she does something else. She says don't do PACs. She goes and do a super PAC. She said don't take money from millionaire, and she takes money from hedge fund people. She says don't pick on my mom, and yet she's the one who put it out, her mom. She talks about her family. She talked about Crowley's kids. So it's different standards that are taking place, and that's troublesome.
All right, Fernando Cabrera, council member, thank you. And the political operative, John Doyle, thank you. And folks, we're going to say goodnight. We'll have debates next week. I know we all agree everybody who's eligible to vote should come out and vote on June 23rd for that race, whatever race in your neighborhood. And gentlemen, we thank you for your presence tonight. Thank our producer, Helen Greenberg.
You're welcome.
See you. Good
Thank
night.
you.